I am a 37-year-old woman and consider myself to be pretty keen on detecting creepers. However, on this particular day, my creepometer appeared to be broken. Over the summer, I attended a week-long festival in my home state of Utah. This festival is an offshoot of the Burning Man festival, so it's in the spirit of Burning Man, but is on a much smaller scale. Many states throughout the U.S. hold their own regional Burning Man festivals. This was my first time going. I went with my 3 brothers and a few of our friends. My creepy encounter took place on the second day of the festival. I hadn't slept very well the first night due to the very loud music and noise, so on the second day I was quite tired. Our camp was situated near some speakers belonging to the camp next to ours. For hours on end, they had been blaring some really obnoxious music, and I was not only tired at this point, but I was also getting cranky. It was summertime, so I was also a bit grumpy from the heat. It was mid-afternoon, the sun was shining, the music was blasting, so I went for a little walk. I wanted to escape the noise and take a trip to the porta potties. I was walking down a dirt road heading for the Johns when I spotted a girl and a guy walking arm in arm toward me. They made eye contact with me and approached me. There were tons of people milling about, and the vibe of the festival was very hippie-esque, so there was plenty of nudity, weed, people hula-hooping and dancing. To have a stranger approach you and start to chit-chat and want to hug you was not unexpected, and they did just that. The girl was topless. This is an important detail in the story, and wearing a long skirt. The guy was wearing shorts. We started to talk, and they want to hug me, so I said sure. Normally I'm not a touchy-feely type, but I felt that they were harmless, so it didn't seem like a big deal. Mistake number 1. After a bit of chatting, I excused myself and said I was heading to the restrooms and told them it was nice to meet them. The guy then told me that they had an RV just down the way, and I was welcome to use their bathroom instead of having to use the public toilets. This sounded like a good idea to me at the time. Being tired and hot, getting out of the sun and away from the noise and using a clean bathroom sounded great, so I accepted. Mistake number 2. I followed them to the RV, and they showed me to the bathroom, and I did my business. When I came out, they had started chatting with me again and offered me an icy pop. The guy pulled out 3 popsicles out of the freezer and handed me one. They said I was welcome to stay and get out of the sun for a bit and chat, so I did. They began to ask me about myself, what I did for a living and such. I told them I was studying illustration. This is when things began to get a bit creepy. The guy asked me if I would like a foot rub. I declined, and my first red flag went up. I thought it was odd that this guy wanted to rub my feet right in front of his girlfriend. Then they asked me about studying art and asked if I ever got to draw nudes. Red flag. I could instantly see where this conversation was heading. The whole tone turned very sexual within seconds. Next, they asked me if I ever got to pose naked for my class. As they are asking me these creepy questions, the guy takes his popsicle and starts to rub it on his girlfriend's chest and then starts to lick it off. I'm incredibly uncomfortable at this point, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to end the conversation and get out of their RV. While he is doing this, he is maintaining eye contact with me to see how I will respond. Then he asked me if I want to draw them nude. I certainly didn't want any of that. I just shrugged and said that I didn't have any paper, opened the door, and got out of there. Luckily, I was creeped on by a couple of people who were creepy but seemed pretty passive. When I had told some girlfriends about it after I'd gotten home, they pointed out that I was lucky that they hadn't gotten more aggressive, and I was lucky that I hadn't walked into an RV filled with people who would have locked me in and just done whatever they wanted to. So just remember, stranger danger isn't just for kids. As an adult, I think it's really easy to get a false sense of security. When I was roughly 6 or 7 months pregnant with my daughter, my cousin asked me to go to an Evanescence concert with her in a neighboring city. We were excited and had pretty decent seats that were in front of the stage but right behind the floor, standing area. Since I was pretty far along, my cousin offered to get us drinks and a snack to tide us over until after the concert. She'd only been gone about 5 minutes when this older male sat down next to me. Immediately the man began to strike up a conversation about the concert. If I had heard of the opening band and just casual concert chatter. He was slightly overweight, balding, and just had this oddness about him. Not wanting to be rude, I gave him short answers and fiddled on my phone, hoping he'd get the idea that I wasn't really interested in speaking with him. A few minutes of an awkward silence passed when he suddenly began asking questions regarding my pregnancy. These weren't typical questions either. How big did my breasts get? Does my baby fall asleep or get squirmy when I have an orgasm? And a few other things along those lines. I was extremely uncomfortable and just decided to ignore the guy when another man a row behind us heard all these questions and tapped me on the shoulder to ask if I was okay to glare at the pervert until he left. I quickly breathed a sigh of relief when he left and thanked the stranger. He told me no problem and said just give him the word if the pervert comes back. Thankfully, my cousin returned only a few minutes later and the concert began. It wasn't until halfway through the show when Evanescence took a quick break that the pervert showed up again next to me. This time he laughably said the concession attendant gave him an extra fountain soda by mistake and offered it to me. I politely said no thank you and told him I didn't like soda and that my cousin already had gotten me a drink. He glared at me and kept insisting I take the drink. Finally, to shut him up, I took the drink but put it on the floor between my cousin and I. He seemed much happier when I took it, and the rest of the concert I could feel him eyeing me and saw he was muttering to himself. The concert finishes, and so we got up to leave, and for me to hit the bathroom, when the man took my hand. I felt bile rise up in my throat and snatched my hand away. He looked at me shocked and then glanced down at the untouched soda and immediately began screaming at me for not drinking his soda and how he bought it especially for me. "'Cause that's funny, dude. I thought you said they gave you an extra on accident." The man wouldn't let me pass, and the place was crowded with people trying to get to their cars. I felt trapped, and this guy was becoming more irate by the second about this freaking fountain drink. So I did the only thing I could think of. I peed myself and started yelling my water broke. That got people moving so fast out of our way that we were finally able to lose the guy in the crowd. We made it home with no other incidents, and the entire time my cousin was apologizing for being absolutely clueless about the situation after I explained to her I wasn't in labor and I'd just peed myself. I still have no idea what that guy was after, but I really feel like he slipped something into that drink. As a brief introduction for some background on how this happened, allow me to say I'm an old school metalhead. I travel around my tri-state area to see various heavy metal shows. The town I live in is a small town with no real musical scene outside of hip-hop and pop music. No venue here has anything I'd like to pay money to see. As such, I'm forced to travel at least an hour or so away to see any shows I'd like to see. This has me often traveling with my wife, my favorite concert buddy, usually clear across the state to see concerts. There's a particular venue we love to frequent, but it's a good 3 to 3.5 hour drive away. But it always has great metal acts playing there, many coming in from Europe. When we go to this place, we usually stay in a hotel casino that's about 3 or 4 blocks from the venue. It's a short walk. This particular night, we had just finished seeing Dark Tranquillity, a Swedish melodic death metal band. It was about 2 a.m. when we got out of the venue, as we'd stayed behind for a little bit afterwards, hoping to meet either Dark Tranquillity or some of the opening bands afterwards, as often happens at small venues like this, and we did, so it was a little while after the show before we got out of there. So we leave and begin to make the walk back to the hotel. There are tons of fellow metalheads milling out as well, and it's kind of a general idea for many of us to stay in the same hotel since it's right around the corner, like I said, just a few blocks over. So we're kind of all walking in this large mob. Now, if you're into the heavy metal scene and frequent live shows, you'll know that it's a fairly tight-knit community. We're all there for the same reason, so everyone is usually pretty friendly and talkative, discussing the show, past shows, meeting band members, etc. Lots of jovial discussion. I had to pee for over an hour at this point, but hadn't wanted to dip into the restroom during the end of the band show, and afterward the restroom was packed with a line flowing back out onto the floor. At this point though, it's hitting me pretty hard, as I'd also had a few drinks in the club, so rather than wait until we get back to our room, I decided I needed to stop at the public restroom down at the bottom of the parking garage and take a pee. It needed to happen. My wife doesn't mind, as she said she needed to pee anyway herself, so we split off. I come into the restroom and think I'm by myself, so I hit the first urinal there and start to have at it. As I'm about to finish up, the door creaks open, and this rather large, bald fellow comes in. He stops dead in his tracks right in front of the door for a moment and takes me in, like he didn't expect anyone else to be in there. Then goes to the sink as I'm doing the same to start washing his face. I'm washing my hands and he looks over at me with water running off of his nose and asks what I'm doing out here so late. I just explain that I'm coming back from a concert without looking at him. He then starts to ask what kind of music. I explain to him it was a heavy metal concert. He kind of shrugs and nods and just says, "Cool." And I'm finished up and drying my hands now, and he turns around and grabs my upper arm lightly and says, "Hey, then maybe you're interested in buying something I have." He starts to rifle through his jean pockets and mumbles that it's there somewhere. I try to politely tell him I'm not interested and need to get back out. He sort of shuffles in front of me quickly, semi-blocking the door. He looks kind of angry at this point and juts out his shoulders. He's probably a good foot taller than me. I'm a fairly short guy, so this isn't really hard to do, but still. And he says, "Look, man, no need to be rude." I again decline, trying to stay polite. At this point, I'm starting to tense up, anticipating a scuffle. The problem is, I'm exhausted. I just spent the better part of 3 hours jumping around and smashing my body into other bodies. Quite frankly, I'm ready to collapse. The guy grabs my arm again, this time a little harder, and goes, "Hey man, I'm talking to you." My sense of trying to be reasonable has left me at this point, as I'm too tired to care anymore. Knowing I shouldn't, I tell him, "Man, you're being one massive D-bag right now. I'm tired and just trying to get out of here. So move out of my way." He shoves me, not really too hard, but from the chest, and steps in closer to close the gap, saying, "I'm just trying to be nice. You trying to start something with me?" It runs through my head that while I almost always usually have a pocket knife on me, in case things like this happen to go down, I'm completely unarmed because I knew I couldn't bring the knife with me into the venue club through their security. So I'm preparing for the worst, as the guy seems hopped up on something, is a good deal bigger than me, and I'm in about zero shape to fight. It's about to get hairy. The guy's blocking my way to the door, as it's a pretty small restroom. And just as I'm thinking this, the door creaks again, and I hear laughter and talking start to flood in. The guy lets go of my arm and turns around to look as a group of 5 guys in black t-shirts, studded leather jackets adorned with dozens of band logo patches, and jeans strolls into the restroom. One of them is a Hispanic fellow with long, curly dark hair. He sees me and waves and exclaims, "Oh, dude, what's up? That was a sick show tonight, wasn't it?" One of his friends, another Hispanic guy with a shaved head, I think took in what might have been going on in here and says, "This guy giving you problems, man?" To me. I look back at my bald assailant. A worried expression has crossed over his features. Even being a pretty big guy, he realizes he's now got 5 guys at his back, a few of them about his height too, and they're all pretty decked out too. They probably would look pretty intimidating to the average person not at a metal concert. He glances at me for a split second before saying, "Nah, man, we're just talking." I interject quickly, fed up with this guy. "And now we're done talking. Get out of my way," and start to barge past him, pushing him aside. The Hispanic dude with long hair turns back to me as I'm passing and says, "Have a good night, man." And I meet up with my wife, who decided to stay outside for a smoke. She asks what took so long, joking that I had to take a huge crap, and I tell her about it as we're going up to the elevator in the hotel. We decide to stop in at the in-hotel bar and grill before returning to our room, as we're both kind of hungry. After ordering, we're standing by the counter for a few minutes, and I hear laughter and loud voices coming in from the lobby. We turn around and see the same group of 5 guys is coming our way back toward the snack shop and bar and grill. The long-haired guy sees us and goes, "Oh, dude, look at this," and points to the window looking out the lobby down into the entrance of the parking garage. There's the bald guy down there, laying on the ground and being handcuffed with 2 police officers over him. One of them has his taser in hand, and its line is connected to the guy's side. He starts to tell me that apparently the guy had stuck around in the restroom as they'd left, and one of them went over to a parked police car a few aisles over in the garage after noticing there was an officer in it. They told him that some guy was on something in there and that he'd been acting threatening and kind of shady. So apparently the officer and his partner had decided to step inside the restroom and take a look. As the guys from the concert were going up the elevator to the hotel lobby, it's a see-through glass tube elevator, they'd heard some shouting and looked down to see the guy being dragged out of the restroom by both officers. I guess he'd resisted or something, because apparently there had been a scuffle before one of them tasered him, and then all we saw now was him getting cuffed and dragged to the police car. We all had a good laugh about it and talked while we waited on our food. Nice guys. I connected with one of them on Facebook, and we still laugh about that guy on occasion. When I was a kid, my family belonged to the local Italian club. Every fall, we had a festa. My sister and I loved the festa. There was amazing food, bocce, and I kid you not, the Godfather theme playing on a loop from the loudspeakers. It was open to the public, but for the most part, it was attended by members. Everybody knew everybody, and someone usually had an eye on the kids, so my parents felt comfortable letting my sister and me wander off on our own. When my sister and I were 5, that sense of security almost had tragic consequences. We were playing with 2 other girls, one was our age and the other was probably 3 or 4, when a man with an adorable puppy approached us. He wasn't a member of the club, and we hadn't seen him before. He looked normal enough. He was also well-dressed and clean-shaven. Nothing about him said stranger danger. He let us play with his puppy and walk around. He asked us where we lived, how old we were, and where we went to school. We answered his questions without thinking twice. We didn't give addresses, though. We knew better than that. He seemed so nice. At one point he asked us where our parents were, and we told him that they were around somewhere, but we hadn't seen them. Now, there was a vegetable garden on the property, but it was somewhat far away and you had to walk down a wooden path to get to it. After he had charmed us, he announced that he was going to the vegetable garden with his puppy and asked us to come along. I have always been a suspicious person. Even as a kid, I knew how vulnerable I was, and when he asked us to come along, I experienced a sudden sinking feeling. I told him he had to ask our parents. He said they would be okay with it because the vegetable garden wasn't that far away, and he was our friend. The youngest girl skipped over to him and took his hand, and they began to walk away. My sister wanted to go too. She took a step toward him when I suddenly realized that something was very wrong. I grabbed her arm and yelled, "He's a stranger!" As soon as I said that, the other girl who was our age ran as fast as she could, grabbed the little girl's hand and said, "You can't go with him, he's a stranger!" She pulled the little girl back to where we were. The formerly friendly man was suddenly very angry. His face turned bright red and he shook. Really, he actually shook. I kid you not. Then suddenly, he wasn't angry anymore. He told us it was okay. He decided not to go to the vegetable garden anyway. He said he had to go to his car for something and asked us to keep an eye on his puppy. He handed me the leash and stalked off. By this time, I was completely alarmed and started looking for my parents. Eventually, they found me, and when they asked about the dog, I told them what happened. My dad is not father of the year material, but he is protective, and he don't mess with his kids. He asked us where the man went, and then ran to the parking lot to try to catch the guy, but he was already gone. I'm 25 now, and to this day, the memory scares me still. I think that's why I remember it so vividly 20 years later. What if my sister had gone with him? What if that tiny girl had gone with him? This was a couple of summers ago when I was 15. I'm male and was around 215 pounds and 6 feet tall at the time. Well, it all began at Alpine Valley, Wisconsin, where I was to go see a Dave Matthews concert. When not at the concert, my family and I stayed at a campsite about 10 miles away. My parents were friends with the people who owned the campsite, and we got put with their friends and friends of friends. It was over 110 degrees every day with over 50% humidity. The first night, it was 90-some degrees and ball sweat humidity. After waking up every half hour for 3 hours, I got out of the tent for some fresh air. It was about 5 a.m. at the time and was cooling off from the last night. As I was sitting in a camp chair, this woman comes out, only wearing a swimsuit. She comes up to me, and in an unrecognizable accent, she asks me what there is to do there. And I tell her, "Oh, there's a lake over there," etc. She goes away, not to be seen. Fast forward 4 hours when everyone is awake. I was sitting there conversing when she comes up to me, speaking a language similar to Russian. It turned out to be Ukrainian. She keeps repeating the same phrases over and over again, and after the 4th time I said I couldn't understand, she gives me the most awkwardly long hug that you've ever seen. As I'm sitting there taking the hug with everyone watching, I'm appalled and flattered at the same time. She then disappeared for a second time. When we arrive at the parking lot to tailgate, she shows up again. I sit down, conversing again, when she sits directly in front of me, staring at me. She then starts asking me random questions. How old I was, how old I thought she was, 15 and 31 respectively, and other things. She then starts calling me Bear. Note, I played defensive end in high school. She told me that I had to protect her and make sure she gets home. Me and everyone else around us feel extremely awkward, while she blinks probably twice a minute while staring at me. I continue to try to avert my eyes, taking my phone out and other distractions, but every time I tried, she'd kick me, supposedly playfully. She complimented me on my eyes, being blue, and my hair. Blonde hair and blue eyes is rare in Ukraine, I guess. To try and get away for at least a few minutes, I excuse myself to go to the bathroom. This is when it gets creepy. She says, "Not without me," and jumps up and follows me to the porta potties. That being said, she's not the most beautiful woman alive, yet definitely not the ugliest. As I walk into the porta potties, she grabs onto my arm and drags me into a porta potty with her. She tries to take my shorts off while taking her suit off. Obviously, this sounds like a cheap porno that may be a dream to some of you, but it wasn't on the top of my list to have sex, especially with a woman more than twice my age. I push her away and go out of the porta potty and walked back to our site without a word. I didn't see her again until the last day she was there, where now she was averting her eyes from me. I still haven't told my parents, and thought all of you should be the first to know. When I was little, there used to be a festival every summer in my hometown, which usually featured concerts in a big field. I'm pretty sure this experience occurred when I was seeing Dolly Parton, which makes it all the more terrifying. I was wandering around with my mom when a man on stilts walked in front of us. This was sort of alarming in and of itself since I was so little, and I remember him looking at us with a sort of menacing gaze. "The man on stilts thinks you're very pretty," he said to me, at which point my mother grabbed my hand and pulled me away to another part of the field. A little later, I was waiting in line for the bathroom, just a porta potty, and I saw him again, but he was bothering someone else. When it was finally my turn, I sat down and then noticed that it suddenly got pretty dark in there. Something was blocking the light coming in from the semi-translucent ceiling, and then, "The man on stilts can see you." I ran out as fast as I could, and I've never been able to go into a porta potty without thinking about that guy since. When I was a teenager, I worked for a concert production company and a couple of related companies that did merch at local shows. The venues for these shows ranged from festivals to all-age venues to the occasional huge gig. This encounter takes place at a teen girl pop show. Word to the wise, if you work in the music business and want to take a glimpse behind the true curtain of creeperhood, go to a show put on by a teenage female musician. Most of the audience were teenagers, sure, but there was a depressingly high amount of weird dudes who didn't appear to have any daughters in tow. My job at this particular show was to walk through the crowd and sell stuff. It wasn't really a bad job. Lots of exercise, fun atmosphere, and you got to watch the show, kinda sorta. Which wasn't that great when it was Christina Aguilera or Hilary Duff, but when it was a band you'd like, that's pretty cool. Anywho, about 2/3 of the way through the show, I sold all my glow sticks and had to duck backstage to get more. But it turns out the stash backstage was all gone too, so one of the management guys gave me some keys and told me to head down to the lower level to grab some out of storage. This is the level that had the locker rooms and access tunnels for the basketball team that usually plays there. The lower level that wasn't taken up with sports stuff was just assorted weird storage and access tunnels, not an area of the arena I was super familiar with. Once I took the elevator down, it hit me that despite the fact that there was a show going on right that second, the entire lower level of my side of the arena seemed like it was completely deserted. In a 14K plus seat building, this is really weird. Unless it's way after hours, there's almost never any time you are completely alone. I got about 100 or so feet down the hallway from the elevator, then rounded a corner and actually thought I saw a zombie for a second. There was a relatively young adult man standing in the hallway, kind of twitching and gurgling like he was having trouble breathing. He kept making really weird noises in the back of his throat, and he was looking up at the lights on the ceiling. After reminding myself zombies weren't actually real, I worried he might be having a seizure, so I did something really stupid. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" It didn't even occur to me that calling out to a strange adult acting weirdly in a deserted area was bad news for a skinny teenage girl. He snapped his head up incredibly quickly, and the look on his face was just angry and malicious. He didn't look like he was in distress. He looked like he wanted to murder me. He was pretty normal looking by standard creeper metrics, decent hygiene, clean shaven, wasn't dressed like a slob. Maybe that's why I asked if he was alright rather than just running away immediately. But there was something in his eyes that was just not right. It was like he didn't see me at all. So obviously, I did the brave thing, and I turned around and ran as fast as I could back to the elevator. I can't say for sure if I really heard footsteps following after me or if I imagined it. I reported him to venue security because he was in a secure area. So secure that in theory that elevator should have had a guard on it at all times, but for whatever reason it didn't, or maybe he didn't even use the elevator. Who knows how or why he got there. I never personally found out what happened, but the paper reported the next day that 6 people were arrested for drug use at the venue, and I wondered if he might have been one of them. If he was tweaked out of his mind, it would have explained the completely terrifying behavior. It wouldn't explain why he was an adult male possibly on his own at a girl pop show for young teens. Yikes. My friend Beth and I went to a Warped Tour a few summers ago. Warped Tour is basically a huge all-day festival full of pop-punk bands and Hot Topic rejects. I didn't want to go, seeing most of the bands were crappy and I wasn't feeling that good that year. I have a chronic undiagnosed illness that screws with my stomach, but Beth really wanted to go, went forth paying for my ticket, so I didn't have any choice. We ended up having to drag Beth's little sister Sky along. Sky insisted on seeing a band called Blood on the Dance Floor, this sceney electronic crap. Beth and I basically said, forget that, and we'd return after the set. We went and saw another band, and halfway through I began to feel ill. I had to go to the Warped medical tents and get water because I was throwing up so badly. We went to go get Sky to tell her we had to leave, but she whined about wanting to meet her idols. Seeing as Sky had Beth's purse and the car keys, we were essentially trapped. So we stood in this long line of rainbow hair and 12-year-olds for an hour to get to the top of the line. The musician who goes by the name of Davi Vanity was rainbow-haired, covered in crappy face paint. He set off a creep alarm already and I didn't even know the dude. Sky was flipping out and Davi began to hug her. You got some nice tatas, he grumbled. Sky was 14. Beth stepped in and said immediately we had to go. Davi refused, and I was too tired to deal with it. Come on, babes. You know you want my D, he continued. We were revolted, but Sky was in heaven. Somehow we ended up on their crappy tour bus. Sky basically drug us to this tour bus, having our keys, being that she was starstruck and all. And I was too sick to argue, and Beth didn't want to make a huge deal as she's pretty chill. Davi was feeling up Sky, and Sky was starting to panic and we said we had to leave. Davi grabbed her butt and Sky started crying. Beth pushed away the pervert and Sky ran out. Davi now approached me, who looked drunk from dehydration, and grabbed me. He literally grabbed my crotch and put his hand up my skirt and squeezed. I screamed and kicked him, running off of the bus. We went home, but never told anyone about it. Still, I'm revolted to this day, and I hear he has done it to others. Disgusting. Hey friends, as you may have unfortunately heard, B-Busta has left YouTube for the time being due to the ever-continuing downfall of the horror community here on YouTube. It's an unfortunate truth that is slowly hitting all of us as time goes on. B-Busta has taken up full-time streaming on Twitch, Twitch.com/B-Busta. I would encourage everyone here to support him if you are a subscriber, to go over to his channel, enjoy his stream, he may still be doing narrations, he may be playing video games, maybe doing conversation IRL. But if you could go over there, enjoy his stream, and if you feel so inclined, please subscribe to him on Twitch if you are a Twitch user. I think it would mean the world to him. So guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.